Hello everyone and welcome to a video on the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel. I'm Spencer, this is Michael, and today we're doing a deck tech on the deck that Michael qualified for the Pro Tour with in Temur Emerge. Not the exact list you played, but pretty close.
Yeah, basically. I think this was just the list that Jerry played in a video on Star City games like in the last week. So this, looking over the list, it fixed a couple of my issues with the deck. But yeah, basically the same deck.
Cool. So first off, let's just go over the main deck really quick. So we have 2 Elder Deep-Fiend, 3 Emrakul, the Promised End, 2 Ishkanah, Grafwidow, 3 Pilgrims Eye, 4 Primal Druid, 3 Wretched Gryff, 4 Vessel of Nascency, 4 Grapple with the Past, 4 Kozilek's Return, 21 lands and 11 forests, 3 island, 1 mountain, 2 shrine, 4 Yavimaya Coast. Wait a second, there's only 1 red source in this deck.
Yes, there is.
2 Gather the Pact, 4 Nissa's Pilgrimage, 4 Traverse the Ulvenwald. So there's like 9 red sources in the deck.
More than that.
Well, we'll get into Gather the Pact in a second. We have 1 Ishkanah, 4 Jace of Vryn's Prodigy, 2 Jace of Vryn's Prodigy, 1 Lashweed Lurker, 1 Nissa, 3 Noose Constrictor, 2 Evolutionary Leap, 2 Clash, 2 Negate, and 1 Coax of Blind Eternities. So let's kind of go over the deck in general. This main deck, what do you think?
I really like it. So the list I played at the RPQ was only playing 2 Traverse the Ulvenwald. This deck is very good at getting Delirium, and that was pretty clearly a mistake. It was also playing Shivan Reefs, which are just actively terrible. And Gather the Pack is sort of the weakest spell in the deck, so
okay,
gone down a little bit on those.
Best creature in the deck, Emrakul, the Promised End, 13/13 for 13. They cost 1 less for each card you type in your graveyard, and then you take control of your opponent's turn for the next turn, and then they get an additional turn. It has Flying Trample on Protector's Movement Sense.
Right, so this card is frankly ridiculous. Casting a Mindslaver that also, Doomblades your opponent's best creature because you can attack it into your Emrakul. I mean, in this deck it usually costs 7 or 8 mana. It's usually one of the two, and you'll frequently be able to cast more than 1 in a game. You're playing 3 of them in the main deck. You're playing Grapple with the Past. You really just... This is an Emrakul deck. Yeah.
Speaking of which, we have Grapple with the Past as the best spell in the deck. Grapple with the Past costs a 1 and a green for an instant. You may put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. You return a creature or land from your graveyard to your hand, which is one of the reasons that I think the deck can play 1 mountain.
Yeah, so basically, this is, it's pretty sweet. It's kind of a split card, right? So a lot of the time, you're only playing 21 lands in a deck that's trying to cast Emrakul, which feels kind of sketchy. So Grapple with the Past is awesome in that it's sort of a split card, right? Like in the early game, most of the time, if you're casting it on turn 2, you're just trying to get a land. I'd say 90% of the time you cast this on turn 2, you're just trying to use it to anticipate for a land.
Sure. Vessel of Nascency and Traverse the Ulvenwald also fill that role.
Right. So
whereas this card fills the role of, I can get back the best spell I've cast this turn in Emrakul or Ishkanah or Elder Deep-Fiend.
Right. So, I mean, all of those 3 in Traverse, Vessel, and Grapple are kind of awesome in the sense that when you draw them in the early game, you're mostly using them to get lands. But as the game goes on, especially Traverse and Grapple, just become backbreaking for your opponents. So you're playing a lot of these sort of split cards where early in the game they have one function, but as you have 8, 9, 10 lands in play, suddenly they're extra copies of your Haymakers.
Absolutely. One of the more interesting cards in the deck, Ishkanah is pretty great in that it bridges you to the late game as one of those rich spells, but surprisingly, Wretched Gryff.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird card. There are certainly matchups where it ends up being a 7-mana Elvish Visionary that should get plussed on by Liliana and still keep Liliana from ultimating, and that's a thing. But there are also...
A 7-mana Elvish Visionary does not sound great.
No. And in those matchups, it's not great, but it allows you to do a few things. It allows you to get either a Pilgrim's Eye in the graveyard to get 2 types for Delirium and, to cast Emrakul a little faster. It also allows you to sacrifice Primal Druid. You can sometimes actually curve, land into Primal Druid into front side of Kozilek's Return. And then one of the key things with Wretched Gryff is that it does cost 7 mana, and it is a colorless creatures, so it triggers the backside of Kozilek's return.
Yeah.
And it allows you to do it cheaper than any of the other creatures in the deck. It also, not totally irrelevant, it does emerge off of any of your other big creatures for only a single mana. So sometimes you're able to play it. If you have a Wretched Gryff already in play, in a lot of matchups you won't actually really ever be able to kill your opponent by attacking them with a 3/4 flying. So instead of spending a bunch of mana and casting a second 3/4 flying, you're actually better off just emerging it off the first one to sort of cycle it.
Yeah. Is its interactions like, if you would have told me this card was standard playable at the beginning of the set, I would have just laughed at you.
It's certainly not on raw power level. It's how it interacts with everything else. It lets you bridge the gap. And one of the things this deck does really well, it has spells that work together. The deck has a lot of synergy.
Which brings us to our next card, which is Primal Druid.
Yeah, Primal Druid is outstanding in the Bant Company matchup, where he frequently will just die. I think I had an opponent Dramoko's command him at one point, which, let me tell you, felt really good. But he also is great emerge fodder, and just a nice sort of curve filler. He's a guy you really want to play on turn 2, where sometimes you'll have like a Grapple with a Past or something like that. But if you have enough lands to not need the land immediately, you're really hesitant to cast that on turn 2. So Primal Druid is a really nice sort of filler card. It helps you find your single mountain to cast the front side of Kozilek's return. It blocks really well. It does a really nice job being a
everything
player. Yeah.
Speaking of lands, we have 0 Sanctums in this deck, which is what really separated this deck from Owen's deck at the Pro Tour, where in this deck we're actually
from Andrew Brown's deck.
Sorry, yeah. Shrine of the Forsaken Gods.
So, Sanctum is certainly a powerful card.
Hold on, this deck plays 21 lands and Shrine of the Forsaken Gods.
I would say, so that sounds insane. I recognize that, but I would say every game I had this in play, it tapped for 2 mana. I don't think I lost a single game with less than 7 lands in play, or won a single game with less than 7 lands in play, which is sort of weird if you think about it, but this deck is really good at getting and playing a bunch of lands.
Yeah, between Pilgrimage, but Pilgrimages in this deck are probably always good for 3 lands.
It's not always, but they frequently are, and when you're casting them for 2, the deck just has you're playing 3 Pilgrims Eyes, 4 Primal Druids, 4 Vessels, 4 Traverses,
It's not short of mana.
You can find lands when you need them. So this card is sweet in that it gets you to Emrakul a turn sooner. It also will allow you to hard cast Elder Deep-Fiend a little bit easier, or hard cast a Wretched Gryff a little bit easier.
Sure.
And that's really valuable.
What do you think of the mana curve of this deck? We see things like, first of all, only 2 Elder Deep-Fiends. What in the world? 3 Emrakuls, 3 Wretched Gryffs, and then a bunch of what looks like random cards in Primal Druid and Pilgrim's Eye, and then Ishkanah bridging that gap. What is going on with this deck, man?
So you're trying to play a lot of cards that are your mana curve. You have all these cards with low costs and all these cards with high costs, but one of the kind of the secrets of the deck is that you can often cast the cards with really high costs earlier than you would think you'd be able to just looking at them.
Sure.
Between some combination of Nissa's Pilgrimage and emerging things and that kind of stuff. But a lot of your low cost cards actually improve dramatically as the game goes on. Gather the Pack is a lot better on turn 10 than on turn 2. Traverse the Ulvenwald is a lot better on turn 10 than turn 2. And obviously same with Grapple and even Vessel, because you can afford to actually take the haymakers in the deck.
Sure. When we talk about your favorite interaction in the deck, you said Wretched Gryff plus, Kozilek's Return, being that you can cast your Wretched Gryffs for less than 7, and Elder Deep-Fiend literally still costs 7 on the front side, but you get 6 mana to flash back that Kozilek's Return.
Yeah, but if you're sacrificing, there were a lot of times where I was able to do something like, cast a Primal Druid on 2, Kozilek's Return ends up either getting milled in the next turn or 2, or I cast the front side of it in the next turn or 2. And all of a sudden, we're on turn 4 or 5, I can do something like emerge Wretched Gryff on Primal Druid, go get the land first, draw the card second, flash Kozilek's Return to wipe their board, play a Delirium Traverse the Ulvenwald for, an Ishkanah if that's what I need, or an Emrakul if I have, 5 or 6 types in my graveyard already. And, you just get a lot of these plays where having things that can cost different amounts of mana depending on the game state allows you to use your mana really efficiently in combination with your ability to hit your land drops despite playing so few lands.
What is your best matchup with the deck?
I would say, Black-Green Delirium is quite good. Game 1, they just struggle to really interact with you meaningfully. Kozilek's Return is still great against that deck because it's going to kill their Grim Flayers, it's going to kill their Sylvan Advocates, even when they're 4/5s, and it's going to kill all their Ishkanah stuff going on. So
sure.
They can every once in a while Emrakul you, but they're not like a dedicated Emrakul deck. You were a dedicated Emrakul
which
deck.
you are, yeah.
Right, and when you Emrakul them, sometimes they're playing To the Slaughter, which is an absolute beating for them. If you get Emrakul and have To the Slaughter in your hand, it is very bad, since it says target player, not target opponent. So that matchup is great pre-board. Post-board, it's probably a little bit worse, just because they get access to more Transgress the Mind style effects and infinite obliterations. But just in a fundamental way, that's a deck that isn't pressuring you that Kozilek's Return is great against.
Sure.
And that's sort of the perfect storm.
When I asked you what the worst matchup with the deck was, you actually had to think about it for a second, and then eventually you came to the conclusion of Jund.
So, Jund is kind of like Green-Black, but it's a better Emrakul deck. It goes big faster. They are still playing a bunch of Lilianas, which can be an annoying card. It's not usually good enough to beat you on its own, but sort of in concert.
But backed with Distended Mindbender.
Yes, they have more discard. They have more. They're just playing, but you don't really care about Sylvan Advocate and Grim Flare. And because Green-Black is typically playing at least 5 of those in combination, they just have a lot of cards that aren't very good against you. Jund is trying to go a little bit bigger, and sometimes what's funny is you'll have games against Jund where you actually cast Emrakul, but then they cast an Emrakul too, and there's nothing you can do about it. And
right.
Liliana sort of makes their Emrakuls better than yours.
Sure. How much of all of that is going on right now? What's the reason to play the deck versus not play it? Obviously, you would still play this deck.
Yeah, I think the deck is quite good. Green-Black is good. Bant is quite good as well. You can certainly lose to the... Like every Kozilek's Return deck, you can lose to the hands of 3 or 4 Selfless Spirits, but outside of that, I think the matchup is quite positive. So it really comes down to, if you're seeing a lot of Jund, I'm not certain that this exact build is what I would want to be on.
Sure.
But if you're not seeing a lot of Jund, I really think most everything else is pretty reasonable.
Let's go to the sideboard really quick. So we have 1 Ishkanah, 2 Jace Vryn's Prodigy, 1 Lashweed Lurker, 1 Nissa Vastwood Seer, 3 Noose Constrictor, 2 Evolutionary Leap, 2 Clash of Wills, 2 Negates, 1 Coax with Blind Eternities. Let's talk really quick about something really interesting here. We have 4 total counter spells on the sideboard. What is this for? What is this about?
So, the Negates I was playing at the RPTQ, and I think that the Clash of Wills, my understanding with that, just seeing Jerry Thompson talk about it a little bit and hearing what Michael Majors had to say about it, was that he sort of had the same impression that I did, that some of your worst matchups were the matchups where you would Emrakul someone and they would just Emrakul you back. And Clash of Wills gives you some sort of a way to try to keep their 13/13 out of play.
Sure.
So it's very good for that,
okay.
Specifically. And then the Negates are good. A lot of the sort of transgress heavy matchups or removal heavy matchups, your decks are kind of clunky, and if you can do something as simple, I played against Black-White a couple of times at RBTQ, and just being able to counter a Liliana or counter even a Read the Bones sometimes is good enough to really put you in a commanding position.
Okay. Next we have one that's interesting to me. You have 2 Jace, 1 Coax as a sideboard package. What is this package?
So this has a lot to do as well with the matchups where you're looking at getting Transgressed or Infinite Obliteration, and one of the ways that you can combat this is these decks will sometimes take out some of their spot removal against you because it's not really that good. A lot of the kind of Grasp of Darkness decks will cut on some of those effects or cut some of their languishes, that kind of stuff, because it doesn't really interact all that well with what you're doing.
Sure.
But they'll bring in a bunch of Transgress the Minds and Infinite Obliterations, and when they do that, Jace gives you a way to sort of dig through your deck, flashback traverses, sort of become more threat dense. And Coax from the Blind Eternities is a card that, especially with Jace, is awesome in that you can mill over it without actually drawing it, and then you can cast it to get an Eldrazi creature that is either in your sideboard or was exiled via an infinite obliteration. So usually when I was bringing in Coax, I would side out one Emrakul to ensure that it would have a target if I drew it. But frequently in those matchups, I was also getting infinite obliteration.
Sure.
And I would, then have some to go get. And I think Jace ties that all together really nicely.
Yeah, as also you can just flash back that Coax from Blind Eternities.
Right, exactly. So if you mill it over with a Gather the Pack or a Vessel or a Grapple, you're not saying, oh no, now I don't have access to Emrakul this game.
Yeah. Interesting card in the sideboard, one that we want to talk about really quick, is 3. It's actually the most of any card in your sideboard, is Noose Constrictor.
Yeah, so this card specifically is there.
This was actually in your sideboard and not in Michael Major's at...
No, he did play this. I played Gnarlwood Dryad.
Oh, that's right, okay.
But Noose Constrictor is there. It's a nice sort of card in that it's pretty good against bans, in that it can block flyers.
Sure.
And it's quite good against blue-red Fevered Visions, in that it basically turns off Fevered Visions as a magic card.
Well,
being able to,
it makes it so that you, get to select your hand every turn.
Right. It makes the whole Fevered Visions thing just not anywhere near as powerful.
Yeah, you have 4 cards in your hand for the rest of the game.
It starts providing you filtering. It's just... These decks also sometimes, will try to go a little bit... It's a very solid card in those matchups. Having the ability to get on the board a little bit earlier, especially where Primal Druid is pretty bad against Fevered Visions.
And even you gotta get on the board and attack through.
Right, you can attack through Thermal Alchemist, you can block Storm Chaser Mage if they're playing that version. It's just very versatile. I mean, it's the kind of card that isn't quite powerful or synergistic enough to slot into the main deck. But I think you're totally right. Out of the board, it just it does a lot of little things.
Yeah. So, if you were to tell people a reason to play this deck, what would the reason be?
Well, I think you get to cast the most Emrakuls per game, by far.
And also, I think this deck leads to a lot of choices. And
yes.
that's fun. I don't know that it's better, but it's certainly fun.
There's a lot to do. And I think that a lot of your wins will come down to understanding how to position yourself in a matchup better than your opponent.
Sure.
And I think that's rewarding. It helps you get better. But I also think that it gives you a chance. I mean, there are very few decks you'd sit down across from where you'd just say, oh, I can't beat this. And I think there's a lot of value in that. Sure.
All right. Well, that's it for this week, guys. Michael and I will be doing a deck tech hopefully every week. This week we got to do one that he got to qualify for the Pro Tour with, but stay tuned. Whether it's modern, standard, legacy, leave a comment. Let us know what you want us to do deck tech on. If you're interested in our opinions, or if you're just interested in learning about a deck, let us know. We'd be happy to talk about it. And we'll see you guys all next time. Bye.
Thanks for watching.